Living near wild animals means being just one step away from facing the true power of nature. Follow along. He believed that keeping venomous snakes and showcasing them on social media was a good idea. However, when he tried to feed his king cobra, the longest and most venomous snake in the world, he was suddenly attacked. An elderly man fell into the enclosure of his pet cassowary and learned the hard way that this curious bird is not only dangerous, but also extremely deadly. A man obsessed with snakes kept several in his home, convinced he was a skilled caretaker. He forgot that he was dealing with cold-blooded, lethal reptiles. Paul had various animals on his property, but on an ordinary day, as he stepped out to feed them, he was unexpectedly attacked by his own deer. A teenager found a snake and decided to keep it, unaware that the seemingly docile serpent was a cottonmouth, one with a deadly bite. In December 2015, in Russia, a man identified only as Vladimir believed that keeping snakes at home was a good idea. At 21 years old, he and his girlfriend, Anna, shared an apartment in the city of Tolyatti, in the Samara Oblast region of south-central Russia. Vladimir was fearless. He kept a green mamba, a highly venomous snake with neurotoxic venom that can be fatal without treatment. He also had a spitting cobra, capable of spraying venom containing neurotoxins and cytotoxins into the eyes as a defense mechanism. And finally, he owned a king cobra, the largest venomous snake in the world, whose lethal neurotoxic venom can shut down the nervous system. No one knows for sure why Vladimir kept such dangerous animals at home or how he handled them so calmly. In photos on his social media, he appears relaxed, posing with his snakes from various angles. On an ordinary day, as usual, Vladimir was handling some of his snakes. He also took the opportunity to feed them, but when he reached for the king cobra, he suddenly screamed. His girlfriend, who was in another room, heard his cry for help. She rushed to him immediately. However, as she got closer, he collapsed in her arms. Panicked, she immediately called an ambulance. Terrified, she didn't know what to do other than hold his body. By the time the paramedics arrived, there was nothing they could do. Vladimir was already dead. After being examined, it was confirmed that he had died just minutes after collapsing in Anna's arms from the bite of the king cobra. It was a swift death. It remains unclear what happened to the snakes, which were left in Anna's care. She later admitted that she didn't want to keep them. Most likely, she sold them, something that wouldn't have been difficult, as some species, like the king cobra, are highly sought after by collectors worldwide. Native to India and Asia, the king cobra is the longest venomous snake in the world, reaching between 5.64 and 5.73 meters in length. Its venom is considered one of the most potent among venomous snakes, living up to its fearsome name. Vladimir's death was undoubtedly a tragedy, but he was fully aware that he was handling highly lethal serpents. Perhaps he believed he had a special bond with them, or that he was an experienced handler, confident that nothing would ever happen. But he was wrong. On an ordinary day, at the right moment, one of them struck without mercy. In April 2019, in Gainesville, northern Florida, 75-year-old Marvin Hajos was on his property tending to his most unusual animal, a cassowary. The cassowary is a large, flightless bird native to the tropical rainforests of northeastern Australia and New Guinea. This bird can grow up to 2 meters tall and weigh around 60 kilograms. Its appearance is striking, with glossy black plumage, a bony casque on top of its head, and powerful legs equipped with razor-sharp claws. Considered one of the most dangerous birds in the world due to its strength and defensive nature, the cassowary rarely attacks, unless it feels threatened or cornered. Marvin also raised other birds on his property, but none were as dangerous as the cassowary. On Friday, April 12th, the elderly man entered the bird's enclosure for some reason. During the interaction, he apparently fell, landing within reach of the cassowary's lethal claws. Instinctively, the bird launched a brutal attack. Despite his injuries, Hajos managed to get up and call for help. Around 10 a.m., emergency services received a call from him personally. In an audio recording of the 911 call, he can be heard giving his address and pleading for an ambulance, his voice weak and labored. Shortly after, a second call for help was made by another person. The ambulance arrived quickly and rushed the elderly man to the hospital. Marvin was in critical condition. Reports indicated that he had suffered deep lacerations, including one that severed a major artery in his arm, along with multiple smaller cuts across his body. He had also lost a significant amount of blood and suffered cardiac arrest. Doctors fought to save Hejos, but unfortunately, he did not survive and passed away shortly after arriving at the hospital. The Alachua County Fire Rescue Department told the Gainesville Sun that the cassowary had likely used its long claws to fatally wound the man on his property. A woman who identified herself as Marvin's fiancée told local media that he had loved caring for his birds. After the incident, the cassowary was sold at the Gulf Coast livestock auction. Hejos was not required to have a specific license to keep these birds. Even after the fatal attack, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission did not introduce any new rules or restrictions regarding the ownership of the species. The cassowary is widely considered the most dangerous bird in the world, requiring extreme caution when handling it. Each foot has 3 toes, with the inner one featuring a dagger-like claw that can grow up to 4 inches, about 10 centimeters long. According to the San Diego Zoo's website, a cassowary can seriously injure or even kill a predator or potential threat with a single swift kick. In August 2017, in Basingstoke, Hampshire, England, 31-year-old Daniel Brandon kept snakes and spiders in his home. For 16 years, he cared for 10 snakes and 12 tarantulas, dedicating himself to them with great devotion. Brandon was truly passionate about his creatures. However, one stood out in particular, his African rock python, which he had named Tiny. He was so attached to the snake that, according to his family, he even called her baby on occasion. Although he never felt threatened by Tiny, Brandon was well aware of her strength, as she had displayed it many times before. The African rock python is the largest snake on the African continent, growing up to 7 meters long and weighing around 90 kilograms. Although non-venomous, its devastating power lies in its ability to coil around its prey, squeezing tighter and tighter until suffocation occurs, before swallowing it whole. Brandon's social media featured numerous photos of him posing with his snakes. His friends often commented on his obsession with these animals. On the night of August 25th, Barbara Brandon, Daniel's mother, was making dinner when she suddenly heard a loud thud coming from her son's room. At first, she assumed he had dropped a dumbbell or some other object and dismissed the noise. Later that night, however, she finally decided to check his room. When she entered the room, she was met with a terrifying sight. Her son lay unconscious on the floor. Desperate, Barbara immediately called an ambulance, but it was already too late. Daniel was dead, the victim of strangulation. Authorities arrived quickly to investigate the case. Tiny the python was found hiding under a piece of furniture. After reviewing Daniel's history, investigators reached their conclusions swiftly. Coroner Andrew Bradley stated there was no doubt that Daniel had died as a result of contact with Tiny. According to experts, the most likely scenario was that Tiny had coiled around Daniel's neck and chest. John Cooper, a reptile specialist who inspected the snake, confirmed that there were no scratches or visible marks on the python's skin, suggesting that Daniel did not react, or had no time to do so. It is believed that the snake accidentally squeezed her owner too tightly, leading to his death. Startled by the fall, the snake apparently retreated and hid under the furniture. After Daniel's death, Barbara took care of the remaining snakes for some time, but eventually sold them. Although Daniel was well aware of the risks and handled his animals with great care, they were still wild and dangerous creatures. It was a risk he accepted when keeping so many snakes in his home. And Tiny, unintentionally, showed no mercy. In April 2019, in northeastern Victoria, Australia, 46-year-old Paul McDonald went out to feed his pet deer. The couple, who lived in Moihu, a small community, shared their home with their 17-year-old son, Ethan. On their property, they raised sheep and also kept a deer. The McDonalds were well known for their kindness and hospitality. On the morning of April 10th, a Wednesday, Paul, his wife Mandy, and their son were at home. As usual, Paul went out to feed the animals. He started with the sheep before heading to the deer enclosure. However, as soon as he stepped inside, the animal unexpectedly attacked him. The deer used its antlers to strike Paul repeatedly. He tried to defend himself, but he stood little chance against the animal's sheer strength. Hearing his cries for help, Mandy and Ethan rushed to the scene. Desperate to save her husband, Mandy grabbed some stones and a wooden stick and entered the enclosure. Meanwhile, Ethan ran to get a firearm, but upon hearing his mother's screams, he changed his mind. The deer had shifted its focus to Mandy, attacking her aggressively. Ethan rushed back and, using the same wooden stick, struck the animal on the head as it attacked. Dazed, the deer backed away, but the family was still in danger. A neighbor, drawn by the commotion, arrived at the scene armed. He fired at the deer, neutralizing the threat. While the neighbor called an ambulance, Ethan stayed by his parents' side. Both had suffered severe injuries. When paramedics arrived, accompanied by the police, they began administering first aid at the scene. Mandy had to be airlifted to the hospital due to the severity of her condition, requiring urgent medical attention. Unfortunately, Paul suffered fatal injuries and died at the scene of the attack. At the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne, Mandy was admitted in critical condition, with severe injuries to her upper body and legs. Authorities described the incident as an absolute tragedy. Ethan was deeply traumatized, and all family members and friends were devastated by the loss. Family acquaintances also expressed great sorrow over the event. After an investigation, it was revealed that the deer responsible for the attack had a history of aggression. David Voss, president of the Australian Deer Association, an organization dedicated to deer hunting and management, explained that deer raised in captivity tend to be more aggressive than wild ones. The family had kept the animal on their property for 6 years, and it was the only large animal living there. It was speculated that the attack may have been partly triggered by the mating season, a time known to make many deer species particularly dangerous and unpredictable. Mandy survived, but neither she nor her son will ever forget what happened that day. In April 2015, in Tampa, Florida, 18-year-old Austin Hatfield came across a snake and decided to keep it. It was in the nearby town of Amauma, known for its numerous rivers and lakes, where Hatfield went for a swim and was surprised to encounter the creature. The reptile, which appeared to be docile, was nothing less than a cottonmouth, a semi-aquatic and highly venomous snake. This species is capable of delivering painful and potentially fatal bites, causing tissue necrosis and severe infections. Despite the risks, Hatfield became fascinated with the animal, ignoring the dangers it posed, and took it home. Living in an apartment with his girlfriend, he fed and cared for it. On social media, Austin often posted pictures of himself posing with the snake, showing an admiration that disregarded the serious risks involved. In Florida, owning a venomous snake requires meeting a series of strict regulations. This includes obtaining a special permit for venomous snakes, a minimum of 1,000 hours of practical training, a secure enclosure that meets rigorous standards, and a documented emergency action plan in case of escape. However, Austin had no permit and never attempted to legalize his situation. It seemed that Hatfield kept the snake purely for excitement, perhaps as a way to gain attention or popularity. A mother of one of his friends later stated that Austin simply liked the snake and decided to keep it as a pet, without considering the risks or legal requirements involved. On a Saturday night, the teenager was at home with some friends, hanging out. It was common for him to engage in pranks and antics, and with a snake in hand, he thought it would be no different. Austin quickly grabbed the reptile and showed it off to his friends. He wasn't scared. In fact, he believed nothing bad could happen. Holding the snake, he began to make some jokes, a usual habit of his, including kissing the animal's head. Unfortunately, that's exactly what he attempted to do when the snake bit him. With his lip filled with venom, he desperately asked his friends to take him to the hospital. James Belcher, one of the friends present, later reported in an interview that he was sitting in the kitchen when Austin appeared, looking terrified, saying simply, "Hospital now." Redfield only realized the danger of the snake after he grabbed it, but didn't take it seriously. Now, he was being rushed to Tampa General Hospital. The venom from a cottonmouth snake causes extreme swelling, intense pain, and if not treated swiftly, can be fatal. Austin painfully felt the consequences of his irresponsibility. Although he was admitted in critical condition, after receiving the necessary medical care, his condition began to improve. However, in addition to facing a hefty hospital bill, he would also have to deal with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. Without the required permits, Austin was charged with a second-degree misdemeanor for illegally capturing and keeping the creature. The charge could result in 60 days in jail and a fine of $500. Perhaps now he would think twice before removing